All right. Our guest today is Katie Herzog, who is the co-host of the Blocked and Reported podcast. Katie, welcome back to the news.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Good to see you.
Good to see you. It's good to see you. I think before we were just doing audio, and this is fun. And congrats on the podcast. I think last time we talked, you were at The Stranger, or had just left there. And this is the first, now that the podcast is taking off, people love it.
Yeah, well, some people love it, some people hate it, which I guess is to be expected. But yeah, it's been sort of a wild ride. We've been, I guess the podcast has been up for like 3 months, and for the last maybe 2 months or so, maybe less, we started a Patreon account so people can support us directly. And the response has been crazy. Like, it's my new hobby is refreshing my Patreon, which is which is just, it's been wild to see. I mean, I have no boss. I work like 1 or 2 days a week, and I'm making almost twice as much money as I did when I had a real job. So
Wow.
Things are good. Yeah.
It's great. I mean, I love Patreon. I love the fact that we can build a community there, and the people that I've met through it, and also that you have now become uncancelable.
Yeah, that is really the great thing, is I am uncancelable. The only person who can cancel me is my co-host, Jesse Single. And if he cancels me, I'm just going to cancel him right back.
Yeah, there you go. It's almost a brilliant catch-22. But it really is important, right? I mean, this gives you the freedom to talk about whatever you want, the intellectual honesty. It's really what journalists kind of need to do, is to have, it's like if you had tenure at a college, you could, have that freedom. And I think journalists need that.
Yeah, it doesn't come with health benefits or a 401k, but I'll take the cash anyway. It's very freeing. I don't have to worry about people complaining to my editor because I don't have an editor. I don't have to worry about pissing off my colleagues because I only have one. He's difficult to piss off. There's no HR department so people can file complaints, and we have absolute freedom. And we also were super lucky. I mean, I would recommend this model to some journalists. It's obviously not going to work for everybody. Patreon, like everything, is a little bit winner take all. So I wouldn't recommend that anybody quit.
It's not winner take all. I'm proof that you can have a middling success. I mean, we're not at the Katie Herzog level, but what we're doing is we're generating enough revenue from our supporters that we can pay. We don't lose money doing it at the very least,
right?
And I have a day job, so that helps as well.
Right. Yeah, that I do have sort of structural concerns about this model. Because one of my primary concerns as a consumer of news and as a journalist is echo chambers and media bubbles, and how we have created and how social media impacts the way that we consume news. So our news feeds are curated by the people around us. And so I do have some concerns that the Patreon model, or there's things like Substack, which is newsletters, subscription newsletters that some people are doing very, very well with, will create sort of more echo chambers where the only people who will listen to my podcast or listen to your podcast are the people who support it, which is kind of fine with me, because then I don't have to listen to get the hate mail from people who don't like the show. But I also think that there is value in forcing people, maybe forcing isn't the right word, but exposing people to a wider array of opinions than we get when we only listen to people that we agree with. So I do have some concerns about what this model will mean for the discourse, for civic discourse. That said, it's great for me.
Well, it's definitely different than what we grew up with, right? With a mass media world where you had to watch Johnny Carson, and we had that shared experience. But this is probably more like what it would have been even in the olden days, where if you were like an artist or a musician or whatever, you would have patrons who would support you, and you would build a little community, and not everybody was exposed to you, and that was okay. Like, not everybody needed to be. You didn't have to have mass appeal. And so in a way, this is a departure from what we're used to, but in a way it harkens back to a previous era.
Yeah, that's an interesting point I hadn't thought about before. Yeah, I guess it's new school and old school.
Yeah, and let me just say, I talked to your partner Jesse. We emailed. And I picked his brain a little bit because on July 31st, I'm doing a how to be a pundit workshop.
I might need to take that.
Actually, I think everybody would benefit from it because it's not just me talking about what I have learned, but I'm going to be interviewing Eric Nelson. I know you know Eric from Twitter, and he's a great book publisher, and he's going to talk about how to get a book deal, if you should even get a book deal. And I'm going to be talking to people about how do you get on TV and people about how do you get a column. But one of the things I'm going to talk about is how to crowdsource, how to crowdfund, like say like a podcast, and at least so that you can break even. Because I think it's not the only way to kind of live your dreams these days, but I think it is one of the ways you can do it.
Oh, absolutely. The number of messages that I get from journalists who say just like, I am so jealous right now. I'm so jealous of you. And not because of the money, although the money is great, but because we have freedom. And there's so much, journalism is in such a state of decay right now. And there's so much infighting and bickering, and workplace drama is becoming more and more public, so people can see what it's like to work at these places. And it's often terrible because, and part of that I think is, is sort of related to cancel culture and stifling of dissent. And if you happen to have a contrarian perspective, or be in your case, maybe the lone conservative at a publication like the Daily Beast or whatever, CNN or whatever, you're gonna get a lot of crap from people, and it can be difficult to work in an environment like that when people want to stifle you or censor you, or just think that you're a bad person because you don't agree with them. And I'm not even a conservative. I mean, I'm a progressive, and I still experience that when I was working in institutions.
Well, look, my whole life has been devoted to being left alone. That's really all I want. Leave me alone to do my work. I don't want to fill out your forms. I don't want to go to your meetings. You don't want
to go to the Robin DiAngelo diversity training?
I don't care any training. I mean, my political statement is no meetings. It doesn't matter if it's left. I don't want to go to like right-wing meetings either. It's just, I want to be left alone to do my work. And I feel like increasingly it's hard for people to have that freedom. And it used to be if you kind of got famous or important, then you had earned your way to be kind of left alone. And now that's even gone. You become a target if you become, if you're Matt Iglesias, right? You kind of become a target where someone else decides to come after you. And you're not even free. Like, there was a guy who, some jerk who didn't want to wear a mask. I think it was in Colorado. And he was acting like a jerk, but he got fired from his insurance job for something he was doing as a civilian. You know what I mean? So that worries me a little bit too.
Oh, absolutely. This is something that I find very strange, particularly when it comes from the left, is people deciding that they need the employer to be the person to moderate these like off work problems, these off work decisions. Like the same people who would say, no one should get fired for failing a drug test at Walmart or whatever, are then going around and complaining to the boss when someone says something they don't like. It's just so strange to me that the first thing that we need to do, that first thing some people feel like they need to do, is make it an AR issue when there's some sort of disagreement, whether it's political or something else.
Well, and look, I'm a huge fan of a free agent nation and of autonomy. I think we should separate healthcare from employment, because then
absolutely.
it would be easier to go from job to job. You wouldn't feel beholden to the man, the company, whatever your company is.
How do you feel about Medicare for all?
I don't know. I have to think about it. I mean, this is one of those areas I think where conservatives, Tucker, I wonder where Tucker Carlson is on that issue today. You know what I mean?
He's quite the populist right now.
People are rethinking these things. And one of the interesting things that has come up is the fact that like the one thing that might save people is unionization, right? If you had a strong union, it would keep you from being canceled potentially. Right. So we have these weird political cross currents right now. One of the things that I am excited about is I think maybe COVID, for all the obviously horrible things about it, there may be some positive externalities. And like one of them could be like the rise of homeschooling, the rise of people telecommuting. One thing I'm worried about though is companies starting to basically, once you telecommute, does that open up Big Brother to being actually in your home now too?
Right.
So
I mean,
we have to
yeah.
be vigilant, I think, on this issue.
Right. I guess, people putting Siri in their home who's listening to them all the time. I don't know that probably there's a significant amount of people who wouldn't really care. I am not inviting robots into my home, but I think there's a certain number of consumers who would be okay with it for the sake of convenience.
So I have to ask you about this letter. I know you guys have done a patrons only episode on this. My wife Erin and I just drove to a great lunch in Middleburg, Virginia, and listened to it on the way. I had to turn it off after about a half hour because I was getting just stressed out. My wife's laughing her ass off. She finds you just hilarious, but I'm hearing cancel call. So it's like, so I'm like, let's put on some country music, for the next.
Yeah. Yeah.
But why don't you just tell us, I mean, how did you get invited? This is the letter that was so controversial. Now there's another letter, I guess, responding to your group letter, but you signed on with a lot of people like J.K. Rowling and Noam Chomsky and David Brooks. It was quite an interesting and prestigious group of people. How did it come to be that you signed on to that?
That is a great question. I do not know why I was asked to be on the letter. I think Emily Yoffe might have been the first person to reach out to me, who I'm a great admirer of. Emily is a fantastic, fearless reporter and has been for decades. And so I was shown the text of the letter, or I guess a draft of the letter, and they told me the names of a few signatories. I think in my case, they said George Packer, Margaret Atwood, Thomas Chatterton Williams, all people who I would, happily sign any sort of open letter with. And then, so the letter was published in Harper's on Tuesday, and the letter was, I would describe it as a very sort of anodyne defense of free speech. There were, I think, 153 signatories. At least 2 have sort of denounced the letter at this point. I think a third sort of halfway denounced it. But not because of the content of the letter. Nobody really is complaining about the content of the letter. The problem with the letter is who signed the letter. And it was very diverse in terms of, race, sex, gender. There were at least 3 trans people who signed the letter. Ideologically, it was, David Brooks and Noam Chomsky. It was ideologically, it was.
It's a lot of range.
Yeah. And so the criticism of the letter, of course, was fun to watch. And people were it was the J.K. Rowling. The inclusion of J.K. Rowling was sort of the pressure point that a lot of people went with, because J.K. Rowling has been accused of peddling in transphobia. I don't think she's transphobic. Lots of people think that she basically has defended the rights of females to have female-only spaces. I have sort of complicated feelings on this. I don't entirely agree with her, but I don't think she's actually transphobic. She has affirmed the rights of trans people to have access to healthcare and dignity and human rights and all that over and over and over and over. But it doesn't matter.
That's not
people
enough.
Say she's transphobic. It's not enough.
Yeah.
And people just believe what they want. And then also, my co-host
100% compliant.
Right.
Whatever the progressive bar is at the moment.
Yeah, the bar that keeps changing. And also, my co-host Jesse Singal and I have both been accused of transphobia because we have both written pieces that I don't even think sort of really question the tenets of trans activism. We've reported on some issues and sort of the trans community in a way that trans people haven't always liked. Some trans people haven't always liked. And so people were pissed. They were pissed that Jesse was on it. They were pissed that J.K. Rowling was on it. And so the entire dialogue became, this letter is a transphobic dog whistle, which is hilarious because it wasn't about trans people. It wasn't about trans issues. It was sort of tangentially about cancel culture. It didn't use the words cancel culture.
Right.
It was really about open debate and free speech, and what the signatories, including me, see as the constricting of this sort of Overton window about what is acceptable to say and how we disagree with people, and whether or not people should just be disagreed with or they should be shut down. Which a lot of people apparently think that, speech is so dangerous that it needs to be shut down. People on the left, we've been watching this happen for several years, and now it has sort of broken open for the mainstream. So the letter was published on Tuesday. Today, a counter letter was published on a website that I'd never heard of. It had a bunch of signatories. This sort of and Jesse and I just recorded an episode for our free feed that's going to be all about the letters. So we'll go into more detail there, and that'll be up later today or on Monday for our non-paying subscribers.
Yeah, so it's blocked and reported. Check it out. You can find it on iTunes, and I'm sure everywhere.
Yeah, all the platforms. So the open letter in response to the open letter was sort of hilarious because of the signatories. There's about 24 of them who didn't want to be named. So it's just this. So they're responding to a letter about the stifling of free speech, and they felt so threatened that they didn't sign their own names, which says to me that there might be a problem with free speech. And one of the criticisms in this open letter in response to the open letter is that, you know, this was like majority like cis white rich privileged people. That is not, you know, actually the case. It was like a very diverse group of people, and I am unfortunately not rich, although some of the people on the list certainly are.
You
but
want
also
to be.
I definitely want to be, but many of us on the letter were not rich. There were a lot of academics who are also not rich.
Well, what bugs me the most is this whole thing about Matt Iglesias signed some letter that's advocating free speech, but that makes me feel unsafe.
Right. So
you could say anything makes you feel unsafe and use that as a cudgel to just shut down speech. But I don't understand how Matt Iglesias signing a letter advocating for free speech could in any way endanger at all.
So just to like go into more detail here for people who aren't aware of the particular drama surrounding the letter. So Matt Iglesias from Vox signed the letter, and then one of his colleagues, a woman named Emily Vanderwerf, I believe, wrote a letter to their bosses, to the editors of Vox, and she posted this on Twitter. And she said Matt signing this letter that, according to her, is full of transphobic dog whistles, which she must have a very good ear if she's hearing transphobic dog whistles, where there are none. That made her feel less safe. You know, and this is the same line that these New York Times journalists used when they were complaining about the publication of the Tom Cotton editorial in the pages of the Times. I feel unsafe, you know, and it's a way of shutting down the conversation. It's a way of saying, you know, your words are violence. This is my safety.
It's really taking it to like 11, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10. Like, if you say something makes you feel unsafe, like the police come in and it's like, okay, shut it down. You know, this is serious. But that really is an excuse. I mean, that is a very cheap. Yeah. What is it? Patriotism's the last refuge of a scoundrel. I mean, this saying that you feel unsafe now is basically a get out of jail free card that allows you to win, not just stop, but like win a debate just by saying that, right? It's like a magical thing to say that wins debates.
Right. I'm going to start using that when I want to get off the phone with people. I feel unsafe. And
that should just be how you end podcasts.
Yeah, that should be.
What was the point of the letter responding to the letter you signed? Was there a point to that? Do we know?
It's very long. There's a lot in it. There's a lot of things that are factually incorrect. I think my favorite line of the letter said something about cis white intellectuals have never been prosecuted en masse, which is, I think, a little bit ahistorical when you think about things like the USSR, the Holocaust, if you consider Jewish people to be white. Actually, cis white people have been prosecuted en masse. So it was just like this strange compendium of complaints. They devoted an entire paragraph to my co-host Jesse Single. They spread a bunch of misinformation about his actual beliefs. They provided links to things that he didn't actually say. So I hope that people actually click through and maybe read his work and come to their own conclusions about how transphobic he is, which is not at all.
I think we can admit he's a horrible, horrible person, and we distance ourselves from him.
Totally.
Even as we
Terrible
do this podcast.
Too. He wears cargo shorts.
Disavow.
Yeah.
Did you say he wears cargo shorts? I cannot.
Yeah. That's a literal hate crime.
What was I going to say? I interrupted you to make a point that I now have forgotten.
It's just the letter was like, people should read it. The website I think is called the Objective. Let me look it up real quick.
Or I know what I was going to say. When did this start? It seems like this started on campuses around the time that Twitter started. And then it feels like this is a Twitter thing. And it also feels like this is a thing where like the proliferation of websites that I've never heard of, so that millennial journalists can get jobs at outlets I've never heard of. But the scary part to me is that people are afraid. What makes me scared is that adults are scared of them. So even Matt Iglesias has been somewhat responding to the criticism, and he hasn't backed down as far as I can tell, but he's caved in a little bit, it seems. I feel like, I don't want to say never apologize, because I think you should apologize. If you are clearly wrong about something, you should. But
Sure.
I think it's very unnerving to those of us who are standing at the gates here trying to not surrender free speech when other people back down and like to the mob. And there's so many adults who end up caving to them and apologizing. It's scary.
I mean, there are 3 letters, or at least 2, maybe 3 signatories of the letter disavowed the letter.
What are they afraid of? What are they afraid of?
Guilt by association. I mean, one signatory of the letter, not her, but her sister, like came on Twitter and said that Harper's signed her name without permission. Harper's did not. Harper's released the emails to the Daily Beast. She has clearly endorsed the letter. It was a lie.
But what are people afraid is going to happen to them? Like, I don't want to lose income. I don't want to lose a job. I don't want to lose friends. I think that's it. Deplatformed from Twitter, but like, I'm not willing to lie or humiliate myself completely to keep all that.
That's your cis white privilege, Matt. That's all it is. It's your male privilege. Yeah, I mean, I think, if you've ever been in the middle of a Twitter storm, if you've ever, as they say, become the character of the day on Twitter, it's a really destabilizing experience. It's hurtful. It's very difficult to have thousands of people yelling at you for something you may or often may not have done. It's not stoning. It's sort of the digital version of stoning, and it has a deep impact on one's psyche. I've been there many times. If I were a bit less stubborn, I might be the sort of person who apologizes for things I didn't actually do wrong. I'm not that person.
What Stalin did to people. He tried to be crying out and have these show trials, and people had to ritualistically apologize and humiliate themselves.
Except the crazy thing is that this isn't coming from the top. I do think that Donald Trump has ambitions to threaten things like free speech. I mean, today he was talking about defunding universities because he thinks that they're bastions of radicalism, which some universities are. I still don't think they should be defunded, even if I disagree with what gender studies programs are teaching or whatever. So they're like, that's a threat coming from the top, but most of these this is coming from the bottom up, which is sort of more disturbing. Yeah. These are our peers. These are people doing it to each other. They're doing it to their friends. There isn't the state isn't coming in and commanding people to disavow their friends and family. We're doing this voluntarily. And there's just this intense pressure to conform right now. And I get it. I mean, I cannot tell you how many of my friends have dropped out of my life because of my opinions, which I think are pretty like mainstream, like left Democratic positions. I'm not transphobic. I'm not a neo-Nazi. I'm not any of these things. And I cannot tell you how many people have decided that they can no longer affiliate with me or associate with me because it's apparently too dangerous.
Wow. Should I be afraid?
Yes. That's the thing, though. You can only be canceled by your own side. So it doesn't matter if I don't have the side though.
Right, I'm in the most dangerous position possible. I'm the guy like in prison who's not part of a gang.
Yeah. You're not in the Aryan Nation or the Black Israelites.
I'm in neither, and you go out to the yard and you get shanked. Watching. I need to be somebody's bitch. Is what I need to be. I should join a gang.
You can be my bitch, Matt.
I will be your bitch. Let's end on a positive note. I follow you on Twitter and whatnot. I've seen that you are like best friends with like a 70-year-old
Oh,
grizzled
86.
It's 86-year-old NRA member. Talk about that.
He's not just an NRA member, he's a Trump supporter. And I think that he may today have hired so outside of his house today, there's a plumber outside of his house today. He calls me up every morning at like 9 o'clock and I take my dog over to his house and my dog and his dog play for a little while. He knows that I'm a lesbian. He loves me and my wife, although I probably doesn't actually like gay people. The dude is like actually very conservative. I think he might be a little bit racist.
But you're all right.
Yeah, basically. And we just don't talk about politics, we just don't. And it's totally fine. Like, it's quarantine. My best friend is 86 years old. He's constantly giving me like giant knives. He has literally 200 guns in his house that he makes himself. This is not the kind of person I have ever known in my life or I would like have spent time with. But when you live beside people, and I live in like a diverse neighborhood. I'm also friends with like the Filipino people behind me and the Black people on the side of me. So this is a fairly diverse neighborhood. Does he hate them?
Does he talk about them?
He doesn't. We don't talk about them. We've never talked about them before. I think he's probably
it would be a good conversation starter.
It probably would, but it's like, but God, then do I like if we have this conversation, then is it my moral obligation to teach him about anti-racism? I feel like it sort of would.
It is actually, because just not being racist isn't enough.
Right, you must be anti-racist.
You have to go.
Maybe, I have a copy of Robin DiAngelo's book. Maybe I'll just give him that.
That's a stocking stuffer, Christmas is right around the corner.
Yeah, totally. I don't know if his reading glasses are strong enough to read.
I love that your best friend is an 86-year-old NRA member.
Yeah.
I want to make like an 80s montage opening of like an 80s TV show about you and him. You guys bowling, you guys high-fiving, you guys walking on the boardwalk eating ice cream.
Mostly what we do is we stand in his yard while he's wearing his NRA hat, and he talks to me about his guns, and we watch the dogs play with each other, and then he talks to me about his health problems. That's actually most of what our conversation's about. I think is what tends to happen when you were in your late 80s. That's the topic of the day and every day.
So what would be the most funny / ironic best friend for me as a white dude? What, like, is it an African-American 80-year-old woman? What direction do I go for this?
Oh, you might have to go in, like, since you're conservative, you might have to go with like a non-binary, like, trans woman with like an anime avatar, who says things like, white men are trash.
Here's my real best friend.
Hi.
Hi, Erin. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you doing? Here you go. Now
good to see you.
Down here. There we go.
Whoa.
Sorry.
You want to?
Oh, I'm not close to the mic. Yeah, I'm not a professional podcaster like you.
Yeah. So, you know what? I was the only podcast host to sign the Harper's letter.
I love it.
Oh yeah, Erin and I were just listening to you on the way to Middleburg, and you said something about a letter for tax breaks for podcasters. I want to sign this.
Yeah.
All about that.
Yeah.
About
totally. All right. Well, that'll be the third open letter in response to the open letter.
I am all for it. Well, let's plug some stuff. How can people who want to support your Patreon and listen to the podcast, how can they do it?
So the Patreon is at patreon.com/blockedandreported. The podcast is also available for free on all the major platforms. I'm on Twitter at Kitty Herzog. I have kind of given up on all the other social media platforms because they were making me hate my own friends. So that's where I'm at.
I love it.
Oh, you got a huge fan here. Erin.
I'm a patron.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I am.
That's mutual.
I guess I am a patron of yours too in some regards.
Yes, I'm still looking for the check to clear.
Yeah, my wife also joined our Patreon, which I was a little upset about because I just wanted to keep the money, but
don't give any to Jessie. Come on now.
That's what I said. She wanted to listen to the bonus episode. So.
By the way, the place where we all met for lunch, wasn't that part of Chaz?
Yes, that was in the United Nation of Chaz, which of course was rebranded CHOP because I guess they decided that Chaz sounded too much like a golf pro or something like that.
What was when we were there having
Yeah.
lunch, you saw, I forget what, it was a surreal sight that you
Yeah,
saw.
because we walked all over Seattle that day. I think we walked like 9 miles or something. And all the crosswalks are rainbows, right?
In that neighborhood, yeah.
And there's like a Buddhist monk just casually strolling across one. And I'm like, yeah, this is perfect.
Was he roller skating? Because that
There
would have been.
there may have been like a skateboard in hand. And I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
this is all, like, you can't make this up, you know?
And then like, when was that, last summer? And then like last week, like there were like 6 shootings in that like tiny little like 6-block radius, and 2 people died. So things got worse.
Yeah, that's bad. Like,
Not
yeah.
good.
Well, I mean, it was all Chaz related.
Wasn't it unity and peace and love, and Katie is a transphobe?
Yeah, that was it. And then a 16-year-old black kid was killed by Chaz security.
Oh, I get now. Defund the Chaz security.
And here I thought
I'm gonna get him in trouble.
And here I thought
I'm gonna get him in real trouble.
Cancel Aaron. And here I thought, but leave me out of it. Do what you want to the girl and leave me alone. Here I thought we were going to end on an uplifting story about you and your best friend.
I want to hear it.
Yeah. We've already talked about it. We talked about her best friend being an 86-year-old NRA.
86, yeah.
Oh, yes.
So we talked about that. Sadly, I have to jump. I have to do this other Zoom, but let's do this again. We don't even have to record it. We could just have.
Yeah, totally. We can do a Zoom happy hour. Good to see you guys.
And your wife.
Totally. Moose is outside waiting to get in right now. Good to see you guys.
Herzog, thank you for coming back on the news.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
All right. Matt, I will email you this audio.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool.
Do you think your audio might be higher quality than mine because of your studio, or do you think it's the same?
I don't know. I'll send it to you.
On Skype.
Yeah, I'll send it to you and you can listen. This is just like literally like foam shit that I bought off Amazon, duct taped to the wall so it looks higher quality than it actually is. And I have an insane setup here. I turned one of those like fake like Japanese like door like room separator things. I like duct taped a bunch of towels to them, so that's the front side of my studio. It's not professional.
But are you recording? Like, are you using?
Yeah, I'm recording on GarageBand right now. There can be like a little bit of fuzz on my end, so listen to it before you go for it because it might be a little fuzzy. Okay.
That was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, good to see you.
Likewise.
Bye.